Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
For the past 2 years, I've worked at a specialty retail shop, the kind where customers come in for one big item, and we help them build the perfect setup around it. By the time they leave, they've spent twice as much as they planned, but honestly, it's worth it. Everything fits together perfectly, and they walk out with something that actually meets their needs. I actually enjoy my job most days. I like helping people find solutions that work for them, and there's a certain satisfaction in putting together the perfect package. The commission doesn't hurt either. My manager is decent enough, though corporate keeps tightening policies to squeeze more profit, which can make things difficult sometimes. Yesterday started like any other day. I'd helped a few customers, made some decent sales, and was feeling pretty good. Then this customer walked in around midday. He was browsing our big main pieces section, and I approached him with my usual greeting. I welcomed him and asked if he was looking for anything specific today. He responded that he was just looking at our selection and asked what I would recommend for someone who needs something durable but not too bulky. I asked him a few more questions about what he'd be using it for, his budget, and other preferences. Standard stuff to narrow down the options. I told him that based on what he had shared, I thought two particular models would work best for his needs. I explained that one had better durability while the other was a bit lighter. He looked them over, asked about the differences, and we eventually settled on one of the big main pieces I recommended. He expressed that this one seemed perfect and asked what else he would need with it. This is where the real sales work begins. I walked him through our accessories section, explaining how each item would complement his main piece. He was pretty engaged in the process, asking good questions and seeming genuinely interested in creating a complete system. I explained that with this setup, he would have everything he needed for what he described. I assured him the whole package works seamlessly together. By the end, we had selected 5 additional accessories to go with his main piece. It was turning into one of my bigger sales of the week. Before finalizing the purchase, I went through our standard post-sale information. I began to explain about the service information before he paid. I told him about the 2-year warranty on everything, free maintenance checks every 6 months, and access to our online resource center for tutorials and tips. I then mentioned the $50 store credit he would receive for his next purchase. That's when his demeanor changed slightly. He asked if he could use the credit today and apply it toward an accessory. I politely told him that the credit was only good for his next visit. This is our store policy. The credit is designed to bring customers back, not to discount their current purchase. But then he smiled in a way that made me realize what was coming. He replied that in that case, I should charge him for just the big main piece today. He said that I could put the rest aside and he'd pick it up tomorrow. Or maybe he wouldn't. Who knows? I paused for a moment. He was maliciously complying with our policy. Technically, if he only bought the main piece now, he could come back next time and use the $50 credit on the accessories. But that would mean splitting the sale, doing twice the paperwork, and potentially losing the accessory sale altogether if he decided not to return. Our commission structure also heavily incentivizes complete package sales rather than just selling main pieces alone. The store loses money when customers only buy the main item without accessories. He knew exactly what he was doing. I had to make a quick decision. Fight for the policy and potentially lose most of the sale, or bend the rules a bit. After the pause, I told him that I would go ahead and honor that credit for him today. With a knowing smile, he said he thought I might do that. I applied the $50 credit to his purchase and completed the transaction. He left with his complete package, looking quite pleased with himself. Later, my manager questioned why I'd applied a next visit credit to a same-day purchase. I explained the situation and thankfully, she understood. The alternative would have been a much smaller sale and an unhappy customer who might not return. The thing is, I don't even blame the customer. Our policies can be frustrating sometimes, and he found a clever way to work around this one. If anything, I'm annoyed at corporate for creating these rigid rules that put us in awkward positions with customers. In the end, the store still made a good profit, the customer got what he wanted with a discount, and I earned my commission. Win-win-win. My little slice of paradise has always been something I'm proud of. 5 acres of land, a stunning lake view, and a cozy cabin I renovated myself. Best of all, it's far enough from my neighbors to feel like my own private retreat. I bought this place 3 years ago, after saving every penny from my engineering job. It was my dream, a peaceful escape from city life on weekends, and one day, the perfect spot to retire. That dream was rudely interrupted last Saturday morning. I had arrived Friday evening for a weekend of fishing and relaxation. The sun was just coming up as I walked down toward the lake with my coffee, planning to watch the sunrise before getting my boat ready. That's when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of a shovel digging into dirt. Following the noise, I walked around a cluster of pine trees near the edge of my property and froze. There was a woman, probably in her 50s, gray-streaked hair pulled back in a messy bun, vigorously digging a hole. Next to her, wrapped in what looked like a blanket, was something distinctly human-shaped. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what I was seeing. A woman digging a grave on my property, with what appeared to be an actual dead body. I called out to her asking what she was doing. She jumped, spinning around while still gripping the shovel. Her eyes were red-rimmed and wild-looking. She snapped back that this didn't concern me and told me to go away. I told her that this was my property and questioned if that was actually a body. She explained it was her husband who had passed away yesterday. She added that he always wanted to be buried by the lake, specifically in that spot. I expressed my condolences but explained she couldn't just bury someone on private property. I told her there were laws about this and she needed to go through proper channels. She became angry, claiming they had been coming to this lake for 30 years, long before I built my cabin. She insisted her husband had more right to this land than I did. I pulled out my phone and told her I was calling 911 because what she was doing was illegal. That's when everything went sideways. She shouted that I would not take this from him. Then she raised the shovel above her head and charged straight at me. I'm not ashamed to admit I turned and ran. This woman was clearly not in her right mind and I had no interest in taking a shovel to the head. I sprinted back toward my cabin, shouting into my phone as the emergency operator answered. I frantically explained there was a woman on my property trying to bury her dead husband by my lake, that she was attacking me with a shovel, and that I needed police immediately. I gave them my address and locked myself in my cabin, watching through the window as the woman returned to her digging, occasionally looking toward the cabin with murderous looks. It took about 20 minutes for the police to arrive. 2 patrol cars pulled up my long driveway and 4 officers got out. I met them outside and quickly explained the situation. I pointed out her location by the lake, mentioned she was armed with a shovel that she had threatened me with, and confirmed there was definitely a body. They drew their weapons and approached cautiously, telling me to stay back. I watched from a distance as they made their way down to the lakeside. About 15 minutes later, they returned with the woman in handcuffs. She was crying and screaming as they put her in the back of one of the patrol cars. An officer instructed me to stay in my cabin for now, explaining that this was becoming a crime scene investigation. Within an hour, my peaceful property was crawling with police. Crime scene tape surrounded the half-dug grave. A medical examiner's van arrived. I answered question after question from detectives. By late afternoon, a detective came to give me an update. He confirmed the deceased was her husband, and that initial examination indicated natural causes, likely heart failure. He explained she had documentation showing he had passed away yesterday. She had taken the body from the funeral home where it was being prepared and brought it here. I asked if she wasn't trying to hide a murder or anything. The detective assured me that wasn't the case. He explained she was just trying to honor her husband's wishes. Apparently, he had expressed wanting to be buried by this lake, but instead of purchasing a plot at the lakeside cemetery down the road, she decided to do it herself, on my land. The woman was facing multiple charges: trespassing, illegal transportation of human remains, attempted assault, and violating burial laws. When I heard she had just lost her husband and was clearly acting out of grief, I decided not to press charges for the assault. The detective commented that my decision was generous. He added that she was still facing serious legal issues with the improper handling of remains. The body was returned to the funeral home. The police finally cleared out by nightfall, leaving me with a half-dug hole that I would need to fill in the next day. I wonder if I should have just let her finish burying him. I don't know if that was the moral thing to do, but I think I did the right thing by calling the cops. Anyways, I hope the poor guy is in a better place right now, regardless of where he be buried. When I first moved in at the Oakwood Apartments, the property manager was clear: every unit gets one assigned parking spot. Mine is number 42, right under a shady tree that keeps my car cool in the summer. Honestly, the spot's location was one of the reasons I picked this unit in the first place. About 6 months ago, a new tenant moved into the apartment across from mine. At first, he seemed okay. We exchanged the usual neighborly nods when passing each other in the hallway. But then I started noticing something annoying. He kept parking in my assigned spot. The first time it happened, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he didn't know the parking rules yet. I left a polite note on his windshield. "Hello, neighbor. Just wanted to let you know this is assigned spot number 42, which belongs to apartment 203. Your spot should be number 28. Thanks." He must have gotten the message because my spot was free the next day, but 3 days later his car was there again. This time, I knocked on his door. When he answered, I politely introduced myself as the resident from apartment 203 and mentioned that he was parked in my assigned spot again. He apologized half-heartedly, claiming he got home late and didn't feel like walking from the far end of the lot. I told him I understood, but reminded him that it was my assigned spot and that the lease agreement was clear about that. He brushed me off with a vague promise that it wouldn't happen again. But it did happen again and again. Sometimes I come home from a late shift and have to park 2 blocks away because all the visitor spots would be full. After the 5th time, I knocked on his door again, trying to keep my cool. When he opened the door, he greeted me with an impatient "what?" rather than a proper hello. I directly told him that once again, he was in my parking spot. He dismissed my concern, saying it wasn't a big deal, and gave excuses about carrying groceries or rain, mentioning that my spot was closer to the stairs. I insisted it was indeed a big deal to me, explaining that I paid for that spot as part of my rent. He told me to just park somewhere else and accused me of being uptight about the situation. I emphasized again that it was my assigned spot. He dismissed me with another empty promise that it wouldn't happen again. But, of course, it did. I complained to the property manager, who said she'd speak to him, but nothing changed. I was starting to feel like I was going crazy. Was I being unreasonable? No, I decided. This was a clear violation of the lease agreement, and he was taking advantage of my politeness. Last Friday, I got home from work around 6 p.m. and there he was, parked in my spot again. Something in me snapped. Instead of finding another spot, I parked my car directly behind his, blocking him in completely. There was no way he could get out without me moving my car first. I turned off my engine, took a deep breath, and smiled to myself as I walked up to my apartment. I ordered pizza, watched a movie, and went to bed early, setting my phone to silent mode. The next morning, I woke up naturally around 9 a.m., much later than I usually would on a Saturday. I took my time making coffee, reading the news, and even did some light cleaning. Around 10:30, I heard a furious pounding on my door. I opened it to find my neighbor looking like he was about to explode. He immediately demanded that I move my car right that instant, adding that he was late for work. I pretended to be surprised and innocently asked if there was a problem. He angrily pointed out that I knew exactly what the problem was, that I had blocked him in and he was supposed to be at work an hour ago. I apologized insincerely, explaining that he had parked in my assigned space again, leaving me nowhere else to park. He called the situation ridiculous and threatened to report me to management. I encouraged him to do so, suggesting that, while he was at it, he could explain why he'd been repeatedly parking in my assigned spot despite multiple warnings. His face got even redder, but he seemed to realize he didn't have much of a case. I told him I would move my car but first needed to get ready, estimating it would take about 20 minutes. I closed the door and took the longest shower of my life. I heard him pacing outside and making angry phone calls, presumably to his workplace. After about 25 minutes, I finally emerged, keys in hand. I announced that I was all set and offered an insincere apology for the inconvenience. I moved my car and he sped off without another word, and he hasn't parked in my spot since. 2 years ago, I was between jobs after being laid off from my warehouse position. Bills were piling up and I needed something, anything, to pay the rent. That's when I saw the ad for waste collectors. The training was straightforward: safety protocols, route management, and proper lifting techniques. Nothing too complicated. I was eager to prove myself reliable, so when my first solo week came around, I was determined to be efficient and professional. Everything was going smoothly until I reached this business complex on the edge of town. The setup was ridiculous: a narrow alleyway where I needed to collect several dumpsters, with a building wall on one side and a row of parked cars on the other. The space was so tight I had to shuffle sideways like a crab just to get through. I was carefully maneuvering down this cramped path, focusing on not scratching any of the expensive cars, when I heard a small pop. The end piece of the building's gutter had come loose when my shoulder barely brushed against it. It wasn't broken, just disconnected from its bracket, something that would take maybe 5 minutes to snap back into place. Before I could even assess the damage properly, this woman came storming out of the building like I'd just set the place on fire. She immediately started yelling at me, demanding to know what I thought I was doing, and pointing at the damage I'd caused. I apologized and explained it was an accident due to the tight space. She angrily claimed she'd just had to replace the entire guttering because of someone like me. I looked at the gutter. It was clearly brand new, but there's no way the tiny pop I just caused had anything to do with a full replacement job. I tried to make her understand that while I was sorry, I also had to navigate around all these vehicles in a very limited space. She just told me to figure it out since that was supposedly my job. She stood there with her arms crossed, watching me finish loading the trash while muttering. I could feel my face burning with embarrassment, but I kept my cool and finished the job. The whole drive back to the depot, I kept replaying the incident in my mind. I hadn't done anything wrong, not really. The setup was dangerous and impractical, but she'd made me feel like I was incompetent. When the next week rolled around, I remembered that narrow alley and decided I wasn't going to risk damaging anything again, cars or gutters. I parked my truck at the entrance of the alley and walked into the building. The person at the front desk asked if they could help me. I explained I was there to collect the waste but needed the vehicles blocking the alley moved before I could safely access their dumpsters. When they asked if I couldn't just squeeze through like usual, I stated that company policy prohibited me from proceeding if there was any risk of property damage. I reminded them about damaging the gutter the previous week while trying to navigate around the vehicles and expressed that I didn't want to risk it happening again. I watched as the front desk person reluctantly made several phone calls. One by one, people started emerging from the building, looking annoyed as they had to interrupt whatever important business they were doing to move their precious cars. One guy in a suit came out looking irritated. He questioned whether this was really necessary since they'd never had to do this before. I simply replied that I was just following protocol, with safety being the priority. It took 15 minutes for everyone to move their vehicles, during which time I stood patiently by my truck, getting paid by the hour. I spotted the manager woman watching from the window, clearly fuming that her busy employees were being interrupted. The next week I did exactly the same thing. And the week after that. And every single week until I left that job 8 months later. I never wavered, never made an exception. Even on days when I probably could have squeezed through, I insisted on having every single car moved. The woman eventually confronted me, complaining that I was being ridiculous and disrupting their entire office. I told her that I understood her frustration, but after the gutter incident, I had to be extra cautious due to company policy. I always said it with a smile too, which seemed to infuriate her even more. Sometimes I'd have to wait nearly 20 minutes for people to be pulled from important meetings or phone calls. Did I feel bad? Not really. Each minute I waited was another minute on my paycheck, and each irritated sigh from that woman was a small victory. They never designated a proper delivery area or adjusted their parking situation. But for those 8 months, I made sure they paid for their entitlement, not with money, but with time and inconvenience. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.